Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. Thank you for joining us this evening. As always, those numbers and email address and website at the bottom of your screen is your best way to get a forecast outside of our forecast, as well as to get a hold of us if you ever have any comments or feedback for us. Heading straight into the weather today, we have watches, warnings, and advisories in effect. We have a high wind warning in effect for the Bristol Bay area from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Sunday. That's going to be for south winds 35 to 45 miles per hour, gusting to 75 miles per hour. And those winds are going to be strongest along the coast as well as in channeled terrain. We also have a high wind watch in effect for Turnagain Arm and the adjacent higher elevations. That's also going to be for Sunday afternoon through late Sunday night. Expect southeast winds 40 to 55 miles per hour with gusts all the way up to 80 miles per hour, again for the Turnagain Arm area and the adjacent higher terrain. It'll also be windy in Anchorage proper with gusts up to 40 miles per hour. We also have a wind advisory in effect for the Alaska range. Through the passes, it's going to be especially windy with south winds. So we're expecting wind gusts up to 65 miles per hour through those passes in the Alaska range, including both along the Parks Highway and the Richardson Highway. So if you have any plans to drive through the Alaska range, starting tonight and through Sunday into Monday morning, either try to delay your plans or make sure that you are practicing safe driving in windy conditions, especially with high profile vehicles. We also have a coastal flood watch that remains in effect for the Bristol Bay area. This is the same one we talked about yesterday. We'll see if the Anchorage office upgrades this to either an advisory or a warning tonight or early tomorrow morning. Right now, the coastal flood watch is in effect for late Sunday night through Monday morning. Any coastal flooding would likely happen right around the time of the high tide during that period. It's in effect from Togiak to Port Hayden. And we are looking at water levels possibly up to 2 to 4 feet above the grass line in those areas. So lots of wind and water headed towards the Bristol Bay area in the next 24 to 48 hours. Taking a look at satellite for today, we can see a little bit our low pressure system in the Aleutians associated with those clouds. We've got one coming into south central today with winds starting to pick up a little bit, some breezy conditions, as well as some rain moving into the area. We can also see clouds over the interior. That's where we are expecting showers and possibly some thunderstorms this afternoon and into this evening. And finally, we have more moisture headed for the Panhandle. It's out in the Gulf right now, but headed that way later today and into tomorrow. So taking a look at our surface map for today, we talked about those isolated thunderstorms developing this afternoon and this evening across the central interior as well as down into southwest. We have one low that's going to be over the southern portion of the state today. That's our weaker low, but then our much stronger low is out in the Aleutians. That's dragging a series of fronts really across the Alaska Peninsula and into southwest today. That's responsible for those breezy conditions developing today, as well as rain moving into the area. Taking a look into tonight, we have a low that was just almost off the map that's actually going to end up being our main low, coming up into the eastern Aleutians tonight and strengthening quite a lot to 965 millibars by tonight over the eastern Aleutians. That's got its own frontal system with it. It's going to be tightening that pressure gradient, increasing those winds across the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And then as we head into Sunday, this is our big action day for most of the weather, continue continuing to strengthen to about 963 millibars as it sits there on Sunday in the Bristol Bay area. So we have those tightest pressure gradient to the east and southeast of that low. That's where those strongest winds are going to be over the eastern Bristol Bay area as well as the Alaska Peninsula area. Also a tight pressure gradient to the northeast of that low. That's what's going to be causing those winds and the turning an arm in higher elevation areas there, as well as those southerly winds through the Alaska Highway passes. Heading into Monday, we see rapid deterioration of this low. So just 24 hours later, we're looking at 990 millibars. Not a lot of movement though with the low, so slowing down as it weakens, centered over southwest Alaska. So those winds are going to decrease pretty rapidly once we hit Monday with that weakening low pressure system. We could still see some breezy conditions, and we'll definitely continue to see rain stretching all the way from southwest and Alaska Peninsula into the northern Gulf Coast and even reaching the Panhandle at that point. Still expecting some shower development across the interior and some additional rain for the North Slope on Monday. Taking a look at temperatures for Sunday morning, we are looking at a little bit warmer than usual in the Alaska Peninsula in particular, and maybe in the YK Delta area as well, with temperatures around 50 to even the low 50s. That's probably because we're going to be seeing some stronger winds by Sunday morning. Stronger winds prevent that heat from being lost quite so much, so it keeps it a little bit more trapped along with increasing clouds and rain. So temperatures not dropping off maybe as far as usual for Sunday morning in the areas with those strongest winds and heaviest rain. Elsewhere across the state, we've got 40s across the interior and mid to upper 30s for the North Slope, with mid to upper 40s for the West Coast. For South Central, looks like upper 40s to around 50, and same story for the Panhandle, temperatures around 50 degrees for Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon, we are looking at a pretty mild day across the board. Warmest temperatures in the mid 60s up in the Fairbanks area as well as the Yukon Flats. We've got much cooler temperatures for the North Slope, highs just around 40 to some mid 40s. Warmer on the West Coast, temperatures in the low to mid 50s, and not a whole lot of temperature change across the Alaska Peninsula. We saw lows on Sunday morning in the as high as the mid 50s, 54, 55 degrees. And the highs on Sunday just expected to get up into the upper 50s, 57, 59 degrees. So not a lot of temperature change there on Sunday with those windy conditions as well as cloudy with plenty of rain. So not much chance to warm during the day on Sunday. For South Central, we're looking at highs quite a lot cooler than we've been seeing, just struggling to hit 60 degrees. And also mid to upper 50s for the Panhandle on Sunday. For Monday morning, we are looking at temperatures a little bit cooler, a little bit more normal, as that low will have passed for the Bristol Bay and Alaska Peninsula areas. Temperatures down to the upper 40s to around 50 degrees. Also around 50 for South Central, cooler as we head into the interior with 48 at Fairbanks, and even cooler as we head up towards the Brooks Range in the lower 40s. Coldest temperatures, as always, for the North Slope, mid 30s to some upper 30s up there, 36 at AKwx. We've got 40s along the West Coast with 47 at Nome, and 50s generally for the Panhandle. Finally, taking a look at Monday afternoon, a little bit cooler than what we saw on Sunday afternoon as that rain continues to spread inland from that low pressure system. So across the interior, where we usually have our warmest temperatures, we'll see temperatures just around 60, peaking in the low 60s instead of those mid to upper 60s that we've seen the last few days. Also cooler across South Central, with temperatures again right around the upper 50s to low 60s, or around 60 degrees really. And then same story for southwestern Alaska, even a couple of degrees cooler in the mid 50s to upper 50s, peaking right around 60 degrees. We could even see some of our warmest temperatures in the Panhandle, where the southern Panhandle looks like 60 to 61 degrees. Temperatures in the 50s for the Aleutians on Monday afternoon. So to recap, we've got that strong low pressure system coming into the Bristol Bay area tonight through Sunday, with plenty of wind and plenty of rain in the area. So no matter where you are, keep an eye on the weather and remain aware of anything preparations that you might need to make for this early fall storm.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to a look at your aviation weather. Sunday morning, we're expecting IFR conditions along the North Slope north of the Brooks Range, as well as some swaths across the southern Bering, including the eastern Aleutians and southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Also, another swath stretching from the eastern side of Kenai Peninsula out through the northern Gulf, as well as the extreme southeastern mainland south of the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains. For Sunday afternoon, we do see some improvement, but different areas of IFR developing. So we'll see IFR for the central Aleutians stretching up into the southern Bering Sea, as well as developing in the Bristol Bay area and the eastern Akpen to northern Kodiak Island. Also a stretch from the southeastern mainland across the northern Gulf and into the Panhandle. For Monday morning, more IFR conditions developing from the entire Panhandle up through the southeastern mainland. Also some across the Yukon Flats, the North Slope expected to be IFR, and some ahead of a low pressure system over the YK Delta and into the Alaska Range. Our biggest area of IFR conditions will stretch from St. Lawrence Island south through most of the Bering and into the Aleutians and southern Akpen. For Monday afternoon, we still have that big swath for most of the Aleutians, as well as the eastern Bering up to the Bering Strait. Also, most of the Alaska Range down through the northern Panhandle and the higher terrain of the Panhandle. And then IFR conditions also for most of the North Slope on Monday afternoon. Taking a look at pass conditions, Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan passes expected to be MVFR on Sunday. Lake Clark and Merrill passes both starting out MVFR on Sunday, but Lake Clark expected to deteriorate to IFR Sunday afternoon. Rainy Pass MVFR on Sunday, as well as Windy Pass MVFR on Sunday. Isabel Pass starting out MVFR and actually improving Sunday afternoon to VFR conditions. Mentasta Pass starting out IFR Sunday morning and improving a little bit to MVFR Sunday afternoon. Tanita Pass expected to be VFR on Sunday, and MVFR conditions expected at Portage Pass on Sunday. Also MVFR expected at Chilkoot and White Passes all day on Sunday. Freezing levels, we have our warm air coming up into the Gulf from the south, but over most of the land area in the state, we'll see about 6,000 foot freezing levels, with two exceptions. The first being the North Slope, a little bit cooler up there with freezing level around 4,000 feet, and the Panhandle, where some of that warm air is starting to get in, with freezing levels 8 to about 10,000 feet over the Panhandle Sunday morning. For icing on Sunday, we'll have some considerable moderate icing on the east side of that low track. So that low is going to be coming up into the Bristol Bay area, which means the east side is going to be significant portions of the Akpen and up into south central, where we expect that considerable moderate icing above 6,000 feet. Also above 6,000 feet for most of the mainland, as well as much of the rest of the Aleutians, above 4,000 feet for the North Slope, and above 8,000 feet isolated moderate icing for the northern Panhandle. Jet stream, we have our main low with our jet to the southeast of that low, 140 to 175 knots out of the west and southwest. So a very strong jet. That's what's going to be assisting this low in strengthening as much as it's expected to in the coming day or two. We'll also see that jet stretch across the Akpen and into the northern Gulf, again out of the west, 120 to about 140 knots there. 9,000 foot winds, we see some very strong winds again in that same general area southeast of our low pressure system. Strongest winds are going to be south of the Alaska Peninsula, about 105 knots out of the west, but even over the Alaska Peninsula, we're looking at about 65 knots out of the southwest. Those stronger winds are going to stretch across the Gulf and up to about the Haida Gwaii area, 55 to about 70 knots out of the west over the Gulf. At 3,000 feet, we're continuing to see very strong winds on the southeast side of that low, 75 knots just south of the Alaska Peninsula out of the west and southwest. Another secondary jet stretching from the Prince William Sound out through the coastal waters off the Panhandle, 45 to 50 knots out of the south there. And turbulence below 6,000 feet, isolated severe turbulence on the east side of that low over the Alaska Peninsula.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
So we're averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles they can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of the primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out-of-state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so that'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at your marine forecast. Starting with the sea ice edge, we're not seeing a whole lot of change since yesterday, but we do know at this point that the ice edge is certainly melting, and in fact we're seeing some of that lower concentration ice as far north as 80 degrees latitude. Taking a look at our Sunday forecast for winds and seas across the southeast, we've got some strong small craft advisory level winds for the Gulf, 25 to 30 knots with higher gusts. That's generally going to be out of the south and east. Seas building somewhat 8 to 10 feet, 2 to 4 foot seas for the inside waterways with 10 to 25 knot winds. Strongest winds in those southern inside waterways with gusts possible up to 35 knots. Heading into Monday, we see those bigger seas moving into the area. So we'll see 12 to 15 foot seas across the Gulf, 4 to 5 foot seas for the inside waterways. Winds 25 knots out of the west and southwest for Monday. Across South Central on Sunday, we've got some strong winds developing, 25 to as high as 40 knots out of the south and southeast, with those 40 knot winds, those strongest winds near the Barrens. Seas starting to build 8 to about 16 feet across the Gulf, 6 feet for Prince William Sound, and 3 feet for the north side of Cook Inlet, increasing rapidly to 11 feet for the south side of Cook Inlet on Sunday. On Monday, winds continue 25 to 35 knots, so some solid gales for the Gulf out of the southwest on Monday. Seas increasing quite a lot, 15 to 22 feet across the Gulf and 8 to 13 feet for Cook Inlet. On Sunday for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, this is when we'll see our biggest seas and our strongest winds, peaking at 60 knots out of the southwest on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Also seas peaking there about 26 feet, so 18 to 26 foot seas across the Gulf, and 55 knot winds out of the southwest and south for the Bering Sea side. That 55 knots out of the south in Bristol Bay, 14 to 18 foot seas there. On Monday, as that low pressure system is passed, we'll see winds come down quite a bit, but seas remain high on the Gulf side, 18 to 23 feet. Winds 30 to 35 knots, so still strong, but not nearly as strong as we'll see with that low pressure system passing on Sunday. For the Aleutians, this is where we're going to see our strongest winds on Sunday. You see that 65 knots out of the southwest on the south side of Unalaska on Sunday. In fact, there's a hurricane force wind warning in effect for that area due to those very strong winds expected as that low develops and moves into Bristol Bay. Elsewhere, 25 to 35 knots, so strong small craft advisory winds to solid gales across the board for the rest of the area. Seas on the south side of the chain 14 to as high as about 29 or 30 feet, and on the north side 7 to 12 feet. For Monday, winds and seas both coming down quite a bit. Still elevated, still 15 to 30 knot winds out of the west, and still 9 to 15 feet for the south side of the chain. Seas around 8 to 9 feet for the north side on Monday. Sunday, for the west coast, we'll see some strong winds again here as that low moves into the Bristol Bay area. Winds out of the east and northeast, peaking around 40 knots just south of Nunivak Island. Elsewhere, 25 to 35 knots out of the northeast. Seas building 9 to about 11 feet with 5 feet in Norton Sound. And on Monday, we'll see the winds coming down just a little bit as that low passes, but still some pressure gradient in the area to keep those winds up with that low pressure then centered over southwest portions of the state. So out of the north and west, 25 to 35 knots. Sea is actually pretty consistent in that 8 to 11 foot range with 4 feet in Norton Sound. For the Arctic coast, 15 to 25 knot winds across the north slope out of the east and northeast. We've got some gales also in the Chukchi Sea, 30 to 35 knot winds out of the northeast, about 25 knots headed into the Bering Strait. On Monday, we'll see winds actually coming up a little bit along the north slope, 25 to 30 knots, and about 30 knots out of the northeast for the Chukchi Sea. Seas 8 to 10 feet for the Chukchi Sea and 6 to 8 feet for the north slope. Now, a reminder, tonight is not our big weather night, so we'll go ahead to Sunday when we're going to have all that wind. We've got rain, we've got multiple advisories, watches, and warnings in effect, so stay safe out there with this early season storm.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.